This is not merely a building. It's a sanctuary of remembrance, a threshold where the veil parts, and minds once lulled to sleep begin to rise. This is the house of reawakening minds.
I entered in silence, intellect and despair, seeking refuge from illusions thick in the air. Walls lined with scrolls, lectures dense with light, where knowledge resurrects what was hidden from sight. No pulpit performance, no charismatic show, just a word in its purity, allowing the soul to grow. History unpacked with surgical precision, exposing falsehood, restoring vision. They taught me jurisdiction, the power of a name, how to stand in one's truth, free from legal games, from colonial codes to Moorish descent. I learned that ignorance is the true imprisonment. Not just the church, this is consciousness refined. I found myself inside the house of.
This is sacred ground, not just wood and stone. A haven for the seekers who once felt alone. Here the veil is lifted, the contract unwinds. In the house of reawakening minds. Truth is the altar, wisdom is the flame. Every soul remembered, every bloodline reclaimed. Time collapses and the spirit aligns. Inside the house of reawakening.
We speak of capitis, diminution, and trust law with grace, pulling veils from the statutes that distort the race. Reverend Doctor don't preach, she teaches through metaphysical keys and universal speeches. From Egypt to Amexim, maps are redrawn, and the minds of the lost are profoundly reborn. They decode etymology, undo the brands, expose how black was a corporate sleight of hand. This is reclamation through language and tone, where status is corrected and sovereigns are grown. From natural law to the astrological signs, the cosmos converge in these sacred confines. This ain't dogma, it's the science of the divine. Every lecture a seed in the garden of the mind.
You said know thyself but gave no guide, until I found the house where illusions died. Here the soul remembers, the contract is clear. We are the heirs and the ancestors cheer. This is sacred ground, not just wood and stone. A haven for the seekers who once felt alone. Here the veil is lifted, the contract unwinds. In the house of reawakening minds. Truth is the altar, wisdom is the flame. Every soul remembered, every bloodline reclaimed. Time collapses and the spirit aligns. Inside the house of reawakening.
They don't ask you to believe.
No, 'cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is true, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are an awakening center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science. Tonight, I am honored once again to sit alongside of my teacher, my elder, your elder, my brother, Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey. Together, we're going to speak on sovereignty and spirit. He's going to do the sovereignty part. I'm going to probably do the spirit part. Moorish Science Civics for the times that we're in. And this is a powerful moment. It's coming just after the Lionsgate alignment in a season where the energies around us feel dense. The atmosphere feels manipulated, designed to keep people in fear and ignorance. But truth is light, and light dissolves illusion. You know that's right. Sovereignty is both a civic standing and a spiritual state. Spirit without law leaves you unguarded, and law without spirit leaves you dry. And together they form the shield and the sword. So, as I said, it's my honor to share this platform with my elder, teacher, brother, Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey, whose erudition has awakened countless Moorish minds, including mine. Grand Sheik, the floor is yours.
Yes. Anyway, glad to be here being with you, Dr.
Glad to see you.
Yeah.
Glad to see you.
Get some work done. As you already know, because of my injured eye, so I'll be not reading as quickly as I usually do, but I'll work with it. Anyway, Peace Moors, we begin with some of the excerpts presented to us over 100 years ago by Prophet Noble Ali, Sheikh Sharif Abdul Ali. And this is for the Aboriginal indigenous people of the of Northwest Africa, Northwest of Mexico, North America. So you're dealing with the different time periods, and those are the name and attributes given to the land known as North America, Central America, and South America, and the adjoining islands, etc. Now, because of Unum Sanctum operations, Dum Diversas, Romanus Pontifex, Intercatera Divina, etc., and the doctrine of discovery, which has been operative on the land, the Aboriginal indigenous people have suffered a loss of their natural divine right and a right to the resources of the land and their connection to the land, not just the history and all rights and hereditaments. And so people need to have a cognizance of undoing or working to undo the satanic and demonistic and demon-oriented operations of governance on the land, and have a clear distinction between the natural right, or what you would call the delivered or agreed operations of governance relative to the natural people, ceding some of their natural right of existence and natural divine right of being, which is known as sovereignty, to an organized body under what is known as generally a body politics that consists, and that's how government is structured. Now, and so it's important for people to know the history here at the North Gate, to have a concept of what's going on relative to the abuses of the Aboriginal indigenous people and how to countermeasure it, etc. So Prophet Noble Ali, in his work to help restore the inherited rights, the natural rights, the divine rights of the natural people, that will be referred to as birthright or natural sovereignty. That's the natural existence of natural beings. And so much of the work that he has done over this last century to help redeem the people out of the connotative and operative servitude peonage, which is connotatively referred to as slavery, has much to do with the conversation that we're having tonight. And so the Prophet Noble Ali said nationality is the order of the day. For without a nationality, from a political structure position, one or the people who have been denationalized, etc., sometimes referred to as being branded, are held as stateless, and such persons have no standing in law, in government. It's generally referred to as civil liter mortuus, distinguished from the law phrase in full life. In full life is the proper order of a natural free people in their natural sovereign or organized body politics, and civil liter mortuus is the status of people held to servitude or peonage artificially and under color of law. And such persons are possessed and used as property, also referred to as usufructuary. And In the divine warning of the Constitution and bylaws presented to the Aboriginal people at North America in relationship to our natural responsibility to get back to our sovereign right as natural beings, distinguished from corporate trading human capital within the body of preparatory constitution principle duly presented to the Aboriginal people here, divine constitution and bylaw. And in Act 6 of the divine constitution and bylaws, the prophet wrote, "With us all members must proclaim their nationality," and we are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are part and parcel of this said government, and that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now. And so Noble Drew also said to the Moors who begin to study and become active to take our places back among the affairs of the human family, or the affairs of men, he said, "I brought you everything it takes to save a nation. Now take it and save yourselves." And why is this vital? Because of many things or abuses upon the people, but an example of said abuse and misclassification, and also status issues relative to people held to servitude at North America. You can look at the Dred Scott case versus Sanford of 1857. And also you can look at the William Dungy case a few years just before the Dred Scott case. Now, the Supreme Court declared that they had more than a century before been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. And that ruling by the Supreme Court, etc., has never been overturned. And when one, out of ignorance or lack of knowledge, civil knowledge, accepts such terms or brands or nom de guerre as black, one is held as binding and or abandoning your right of self heritability, and by that ignorance in a status position, binding yourself to that status, that did civil letter status in law. Now, consider the Treaty of Peace and Friendship as an example between Morocco and the United States, signed 1787 and renewed in 1836. Now, Article 20 reads, "If any of the citizens of the United States or any persons under their protection shall have any disputes with each other, the consul shall decide between the parties, and whenever the consul shall require any aid or assistance from our government to enforce his decisions, it shall be immediately granted to him." Now, that treaty is the oldest running treaty in United States history and still in force. And that treaty proves Moors are not foreigners. We are the heirs of the land. And in relationship to the judicial powers of the United States, Article 3, Section 1 and 2, you will see the establishment of the lawful courts operating on the land, which is constitutes an international venue. It is public ministers, diplomats, and consuls. And so in relationship to enforcement of constitutional principle, that venue of diversity would be the consular or consul position, etc., established in law. That's the law. Not a state's courts, not a municipal court, but the consular court. Now, for those who know the political operations at North America, it is known by fact and documented that during the Eisenhower administration, they abandoned jurisdiction at Morocco and by virtue of colorable operations, suspended the consular venue. And this was where they introduced the civil rights or the 14th Amendment operations in the public venue for operations to dispel their obligation to constitutional principles, etc. Now, in the Circle 7 Quran, chapter 47, reminds us that the fallen sons and daughters of the Asiatic nation of North America need to learn to love instead of hate, and to know of their higher self and lower self. Nationality is civic standing, and it is the first step towards spiritual elevation.
Yeah. Well,
Dr. G.
Yeah, this is why words matter. You know, we talked about this because you're always correcting me. I mean, gently correcting me about the words that they're not just labels. They're contracts. The contracts of vibration. You know, and so when you accept, and you get on me all the time, a false name, or even when I'm using it sort of just in trying to describe something, but you make sure that even in having a conversation that's educational, that I need to use the right terminology. Because when you think in terms of the vibration and the energy that comes from using certain words, you know, like you said, when we accept the Negro, black, color, these words bind you to low vibration. Because
in law, they're called nom de guerre. And in law, when operating or interchanging in a state of law or in an issue of controversy, if one operates in a nom de guerre, there's no standing in law. This is the function of branding systems that has not been told to the people. So civically, the branding creates the spiritual condition, whereas the natural being has no right or standing in law. Thus, the heritability, hereditaments, both corporal and incorporeal, can be abridged, because, in other words, it rides along or harmonizes with the concept that all hereditaments are tied to heritability relative to honor of your mothers and fathers, which means it's descendable. And when the nom de guerre is introduced artificially or by intent, that knocks the person, the natural being, off the right of heritability. And for lack of civil knowledge or civil instruction, many of the people would look at it as just simply informational flaws and not know that it actually denies right of heritability. Under law, in operations of law, that condition would be called wardship tenures.
And it's also vibrational and energetic, and so there's shackles in the unseen. So, but when you declare that you're Moorish American, you break that spell. The vibration shifts, you rise, you rise in frequency and vibration, and sovereignty is no longer just paperwork. It becomes alignment of spirit and law, which is what we're talking about tonight. And that alignment, that's what makes you untouchable. That's when you know. I know that when you don't know, and if you step into their venues and so forth, and you make those missteps, then you put yourself in a low vibrational place, also an opportunity for them to, take advantage of.
Well, from a legal perspective and counter to lawful, this is where the branding or the nom de guerre system, how it functions in society. But logically, in order to deceive the people, this is one of the reasons why through the General Education Board of 1902, they deliberately denied fundamental grammatical corrections or knowledge of basic etymology to the people, that allowed them to project false concepts relative to meanings of words, relative to pedigree, meanings or the pedigree names of people and nations, etc., for conquest purposes. This is one of the reasons why when you go into the history of the operations of the conquest of the Western Hemisphere, why so much effort has always been put in killing the culture, killing the language, corrupting erudition systems, and also from a political perspective as a weapon, the establishment of the Board of Education, 1902, with John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates. And so, in general, many of the people had, for a lack of knowledge, didn't look at the education system as a military weapon, when in fact that's what it was and that's what it is. And so some of the things that we're talking about is to counter or to correct some of those missteps that have been structured within the operations of society, for the people to start taking responsibility over self, etc., to restore the rights that belong to the people naturally. And of course, you have to know what you're dealing with, and so it's important to comprehend the operations of the natural being in society and what is called the natural person, and distinguish that from what is known as the corporate person, and also the Circle Church and Chancery's operations of the British Accredited Registry, why they introduced into the operations of legal process personage on the corporate entity, the artificial construct, so that they could use that position to intrude or to subvert the rights of the natural being. So this is why they introduced the corporate entity as person two. And that has much to do with the operations of the artificiality of the 14th Amendment, which is traditionally referred to as a straw man.
If I may interject, I wonder how many people really know that. 'Cause I didn't, I'm not going to say I was today years old, but it's probably been within the last year or so too that I realized that using the word person, saying I'm a person, means that I am a corporate fiction.
And it doesn't see, this is the key.
Well,
Dr.
it puts
J.
me in the same category as
it's an assumption, because the person, see, this is what it is. In around 1862, in that area, the personage projection on the corporate entity was interjected into legal process. Prior to that, it didn't mean corporation. Prior
it
to
meant
62.
Us. It meant
didn't mean corporation prior to that period.
Okay.
That was introduced.
Okay.
Meaning that was artificially introduced in the social structure.
But I guess what I'm asking you is, does that mean they took something that we could identify as being and added something that wasn't, as in their corporations, which then, if you will, tainted
the owners,
the meaning?
The owners of the United States Corporation Company began to promote their private corporate operations as the country, i.e. the republic. The republic was overthrown by them subtly. Now, this has much to do with the confusion that people have with the Emancipation Proclamation and the manumission, which we've talked about before.
Well, for those that may not know, can you because I thought for years and years that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and then I heard about then I learned about manumission.
Yeah, that's the training.
Yeah.
Now, so the manumission is the transfer.
Yeah.
Of the operative slave holders' sister Q position, or so-called claimed ownership of the body and souls of the people, being subdivisions of unum sanctum operations, which means these are subdivisions of the church. This is the connection, and why they've always told the people in the public venue that there was a separation of church and state, when actually the corporate church owned the corporate state in a corporate capacity. The manumission is where they, i.e., the people who are a part of the colonial operations, transferred their operations of ownership of the people to the Congress. That constitutes the manumission. In other words, it's a transfer of operations or responsibility under faufourship, which would be equated to what is called trusteeship. In other words, the Congress for the United States took the responsibility of organizing and administrating over human chattel property on behalf of their, i.e., so-called citizens, which at that time was conjoined strictly for what they refer to as European or English male, not even the women.
Mhm.
That's originally that. And so that manumission is that process. This has much to do with why the 40 acres and a mule operations that was projected by Abraham Lincoln was never honored. This had much to do with the motive, true, also of his assassination. That is not taught in the books, because if they honored the Emancipation Proclamation and the 40 acres and the mule, they would have given the land back to the Aboriginal people to whom it actually belonged. But they could not support the reconstruction of history and the maintenance of chattel slavery institutionalized within government structure if they told the real history. This is why many people who don't know the real civic operations of what took place here have bought into the reconstructed concept of the people being brought here from the other side when the people were already here.
True. Yeah.
You know, and so one part of the collusion of the reconstruction history creates the dynamics of the forced servitude and chattel 14th Amendment straw operations that the people are used to, and coming under the misrepresentation of what is called racism and prejudice is a cover up for human trafficking. It's given other names. So the nom de guerre becomes what is known at North America and part of South America as quote unquote chattel slavery, which is a cover up for actually colonial operations and assimilation of the people and the land. And then from a political construct, creating linguistic forms and nom de guerre, which are brand names, to separate the people from the land so that they can claim or assimilate the land. That's called colonial operations. So therefore, they needed to create a language that supports the system. That's what is known as codes noirs, or commonly referred to as black codes, etc. And over a period of time, in order to support that system, this is why the 14th Amendment was introduced unconstitutional, because when you do the research into the congressional records, you'll see that the 14th Amendment was never lawfully ratified. Not only that, after the operatives of the Khazarian operatives operating within the structure that owned the corporate operations, etc., overthrew the republic, etc., then they became a private foreign corporate entity. And thus everything that was created under that structure becomes what is commonly known in these days, quote unquote, the U.S. democracy, distinguished from the United States Republic, which is the constitutional order of government supported by the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1786, 87, 88, the Ordinance of 1787, 88, and then the Constitution for the United States, i.e., and that's when you see the operations, or why in the reconstructed history, they will accredit George Washington in the public record as being the first president, when in fact he was not. John Hanson was the first president, 1781. And so to cover up that history, they had to reconstruct history. This is why we're talking or hitting on some of these things. And so the masses of the people are not aware that they set up a Sister QV trust operations with that manumission. So that manumission, they needed a structure of legal process in order to do the human trafficking and not have it be publicly acknowledged, meaning that how do you publicly trade humans and hide it in structure of law? They had to create, by color necessity, a color of law structure. Thus, the Sister QV trust operations, where they're holding the right or the life of a people under trust law, and they create a routing system, etc., where all rights or property or all hereditaments, corporal and corporate, would be manumitted through the Congress. That's why the Congress controls the Sister QV Trust, and the Sister QV Trust is hidden in the 14th Amendment operations of what is known as the straw man. So when you look what people hear of the straw man being the 14th Amendment or artificial person, i.e., which means the living dead, the civil liter mortuus is actually the Sister QV Trust operations. So the manumission, actually, what is operative is the Sister QV Trust, which is not talked about publicly, but operates through the stock market.
Is that why?
So this is what we need to clear up.
And bondage.
That's what the bondage is.
Okay.
That's what the bondage is. And so the Sister QV Trust is essentially the legal operations that is not made public, but is operative in the halls of Congress and in the stock market and in Seed and Company and in New York, etc., with human trafficking. And so to hide the fact that what is known as slavery never ended, the 14th Amendment was created as a cover. But yet the operations of the Sister Q Trust was the actual political structure, which is why for generations, why the people, the indigenous and Aboriginal people have always been constantly generation after generation after generation after generation fighting for rights because they never experienced it. But it was hidden under a color of law. This is what the Sister Q Trust is. Now, everything that is heritable, corporal and incorporeal, that means things physical, things cultural. This is where the tradition of when you see our people over the generations where they invented things and never got credit for it. Mm-hmm. That's because Sister QV Trust. All right. 14th Amendment. But their concepts was that Black was a people. Black Indian was a people. Black Negro was a people. These are all nom de guerre. Mm-hmm. See, so that takes these people out of their natural order, and by operations of law, of color of law, they were classified as wardship tenure, civil liter mortuus. That's the real processes. And by the people not knowing that that's how things actually operate, the people were out of misinformation and a designed ignorance, clinging to the brand systems that delude to slavery, not knowing that agreeing to these brands by legal process implied that they agreed to the status that go with it. Although by right of law, and by truth of pedigree, all of these were nom de guerre, or what is known as brands. but the people didn't know it took them out of heritability. And so without having knowledge of civics and true history operating on the land, the people, through ignorance and through training, what is called animal husbandry training, were for generations cooperating with the brand system, agreeing to them, because they would pass color of law operations, right, and bills of attainder that, and attach these names to it, and then the people attached to the names, not knowing it was operations of a dead status. This has been going on for decades. The conversation is to correct that in order to bring the people back to what is called in full life standing, so that by right of law, they can challenge or counter. Because outside of that, while the people hold on to the nom de guerre system ignorantly, they're agreeing to the dead status that creates what is called the man of straw. This is why it is uniquely, and whenever these things are mentioned, that dead status is applied to Aboriginal people here that they refer to as people of color, distinguished from everybody else. And why our people would feel that we were, targeted out, partiality from a partial position, and always targeted, not knowing that the status is the straw man, not the actual living being.
Right.
The status is the straw man. So the being has to, by cognizance and by legal proclamation, come out from the status to challenge it on the record by affidavit. This has much to do with those who know law and the nature of the William Dungy case, and which is most talked about, which is the Dred Scott case, etc., relative to plaintiff in error, if you get the point. Because he was claiming the rights that would be protected by treaty, because remember, when you're talking treaty, ordinance of 1787, and Constitution, they all go together. But by the people not being taught civics, they think when they say Constitution, that they only mean that document of 1781, the Articles of Confederation, Articles of Association, Constitution for the United States. They think that one document. When you're saying Constitution law or supreme law of the land, you're talking Constitution, the treaties, Constitution, Articles of Confederation constitutes the Constitution. That's why they don't teach civics, because if they taught the truth of the treaty, then they'd have to tell the truth of how they got to where we are now, meaning how was the United States actually structured. This is why they will not teach the true history that's in the records of John Hanson, and also even with the construction of the treaty under Arthur St. Clair. So the masses of the people in the school systems don't know anything about Arthur St. Clair administration when the treaty was adopted. This is why they create the reconstructed history and present George Washington as the first president, when in fact he was the ninth. So that's just an interjection. And so this has to do with why, from a political perspective of operative law, legal, not lawful, human trafficking, the straw man, or which also relates to the Fourth Amendment, which in legal process is operative under the Sister QV trust operations, is not taught. Because if you break that up, the whole mind control, etc., which they sometimes refer to as MK Ultra, etc., falls apart. Then you have rebellion.
But you know what? With you saying that, most people think in terms of MK Ultra as a specific targeting, say, young people to adopt, but they don't realize that it was a broader. It is not
Yes.
was is I believe still
and earlier than people think it is.
Yeah, much broader.
Earlier You know, and it's like this, and this is what makes it uncomfortable for people, because people like to think of themselves as being spiritual because they went to church, mosque, synagogue, and temple. But if they don't know the civil history and how the spiritual corruption is transferred into the civil realm,
they're tied together, though.
they're absolutely related.
Yeah.
You know, this is why they don't teach the spiritual, the dark spirit nature of corrupt civil operations. But that has much to do with what they call the period of reconstruction.
Right.
So people think they're rebuilding buildings that were torn down or something like that in a war. No, they were reconstructing history. So once they burn books, remember, everything wasn't burned, and there's still information out there. So they have to start controlling the narrative by controlling what is out there, what is not. This has much to do with the motive as to why they established what is known as the Smithsonian, so that they could systematically and structurally start constructing the public narrative. This is why you see for decades how concepts among the people have been changed relative to their concepts of knowledge, including up into the point of creating schisms with the people, with the different tribes, even up to the War Department establishing the Bureau of Indian Affairs to create more schism with the tribes, etc. And so the people who didn't know the real history start thinking that the cowboy and Indian paradigm is structured here, when actually that paradigm of cowboy and Indian was constructed actually in Italy.
Really?
Yeah, and transferred here.
But
that storyline.
What about the whole thing with the but however the Buffalo Soldiers were our people
now,
that were actually,
because
they would wear buffalo skins to and come and
even if the people knew the truth, and all can't be told in say one lesson, our people don't even know that what they call the Confederate flag also belonged to us.
Yeah.
Again, there's so many areas, but I'm just throwing that out there to show you how the mind has been controlled, where people have rejected things that actually belong to us.
I get it. Well, yeah. I get
Meaning that if they get you to reject your own,
right,
from the
it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's called abandonment.
But
it's very important.
Keeps on, and then we teach our children and teach their children.
Yes.
But in terms of the reconstruction, I recently learned something that possibly, I know we always talk about 500 years maybe have been added, but that as much as maybe 800
or
years
changing
or more. Yeah, 800 years may have been added to the calendar, so-called, with the Gregorian and the Julian calendars, or they were competing for one. But in order to reconstruct the history, they had to put time in.
Remember, they had to alter the timeline in the minds of the people.
Right.
See, so this is why, for instance, like when you look at 1776, right? You see them always mention 1776, right? So you don't see the correlation between the adoption of the treaty. So now you have what is called the Moorish calendar, or that's would be the Aboriginal people here calendar. And then you deal with the Gregorian calendar. But people who know the history know the correlations, and this is why, like for instance, when you go into the documents on American history, just like the last time when we read George Washington's letter, you'll see the correlation of the year. And all you have to do is make a subtraction
to the Sultan of Morocco.
Yeah, absolutely. And so most people have been trained from Frederick T. Gates and the Rockefeller Foundation operations of 1902. Because remember, the Southern Board of Education was overthrown and they introduced the General Board of Education in 1902. This goes parallels with the same time when they murdered Winona at Philadelphia. Now, and when you start looking at their operations, because remember, for the order of the Republic, with supreme law of the land, the Republic, the treaty, the ordinance, and the Constitution for the United States, the establishment of the Republic order, dealing with the hybrid Europeans operating on the land, etc., under treaty, etc. That's Philadelphia, which is still the Capitolium. Now, this is why when the effort was made to reconstruct the history around around 89, 90, they moved with the overthrow, the Republic order overthrew the Republic and set up the U.S. democracy corporate operations at Washington, D.C., which is the 10 square miles they talk about. Then they put George Washington's memorial there with the obelisk representing Egypt, i.e., because they've conquered Egypt, etc. And then the Franciscan Brotherhood as a gift to what they refer to as the Corsairs.
Those are small ships, right?
Yeah, but but they all that not just the small ships, but they refer to the people also.
Okay.
For overthrowing the Aboriginal people, the gift was the goddess of Columbia, which is symbolized with the what they refer to as the Statue of Liberty, and she has an iron frame and then copper cladding, and she's placed in the bay at New York, and all of these basically, including what is known as later the Golden Gate Bridge, all of these are symbols, satanic symbols for the conquest of the Moors, etc. They're also used in ritual form in different ways, but people need to know why these things actually exist. So they have to cover up the history because the timeline would not correlate. That's why it's important for them from a colorable position for generations to promote for the last few centuries that George Washington was the first president. He was not. Sister QV Trust is what they actually operate through the House of Representatives and the Congress, etc., to do the human trafficking and hide it under legal operations, not lawful operations, i.e., that whole paradigm of fiat, which means fiat is not just false or counterfeit finance. It's not just counterfeit money. It's counterfeit government, right? And any edict coming under the U.S. democracy is fiat. So they needed both a language, a monetary system, and a dogma system, i.e., to control the people. So it's missionary, mercenary, military. It's called the 3 M's. So the people here feel put upon. They know things like you were saying earlier. They feel this dark spirit, but they don't know that they're dealing with dark spirit. It's not an attitude. The history is a fraud. The financial system is a fraud. The dogma system under the guise of religion is a fraud. All of it is operative in what you would call a structured manner, corporately controlled under Sister QV. And this is where they have control of the life for the length of the life, all hereditaments, all lands, and all transactions and allonges related to the same under the Sister QV Trust, i.e., loosely referred to as a 14th Amendment straw man. So
is there an unless to that? Unless we as Moors do what?
This is where and why so many people who really know the real history have an issue with Noble Drew Ali. Because from a law perspective, he did such and structured such manners to, by right of law and right of claim, to restore the right of the people to both the land and their hereditaments. Logically, countermeasures would be made because this knowledge is not to be known because the system collapses. It's not only the 14th, because remember the 14th Amendment, when you look at the Sister QV, 14th Amendment, both the same. The public will hear straw man, 14th Amendment. Those who are operating in the law and the stock and bond market, Sister QV. That's not the public. That's the operations of the color of government among themselves. That's why the public is never privy to congressional meetings. Never. Never. The language is different. This is why when you get into the issue of the Sister QV, why, number one, the general public generally are not familiar with it. Some of them who study a little bit of civics, if you'll say 14th Amendment, straw man, they relate to a degree. If you refer to the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands with the 3-year operation, just loosely referred to in reconstructed history as the Freedmen's Bureau, they've heard that before, but they haven't heard the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, which is the official name of that operation. That would tie the people back to the land. That's why you never hear them say the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Land, which is the official title.
Who abandoned the land?
The abandonment comes by virtue of the nom de guerre, the straw man. See, and this is back to declaring your nationality. The people don't know the brand system or the nom de guerre system was done to get the people out of ignorance, to deny their pedigree, which disconnects them from the land by legal process, not lawful process. This is the wardship tenure operations. Let me show you this, Dr. G, because I think it'd be very helpful for the people if you in concept read this, right? Because we have to, to have an understanding of what's going to correct things, the people have to have a more clear comprehension of legal versus lawful process and the language that takes place in secret society and among Illuminati and among the people that are actually controlling your estate, so that you understand the way they talk to you is not the way they talk among each other. Meaning how they operate in the bond system is not how they operate in the real political realm. The language is never shared with the masses. And read this very clearly and slowly so that the people have a comprehension of what they're dealing with.
All right. Wardship. In military tenures, the right of the Lord to have custody as guardian of the body and lands of the infant heir without any account of profits until he was 21 or she was 16 or she's 16. In Sokaj, the guardian was accountable for profits, and he was not the Lord, but the nearest relative to whom the inheritance could not descend, and the wardship ceased at 14. In copyholds, the Lord was the guardian, but was perhaps accountable for profits.
Now you understand the necessity of them creating what is called the brand system, the nom de guerre, so that they declare the people as what, minors in suckage, because suckage means suckage like a child is on a mother's breast. So regardless of age, you're one is held as what? An incapacitated being.
Wow.
An incompetent being. That's why the legal term minority is also applied to people, Aboriginal people who have been conquered under colonial operations. So there's a legal process of the Sister QV, which is what we're talking is legal process concerning what the straw man is. We're making people familiar with what is done in the bond system that is not spoken of in the public. That all relates to what is known as the 14th Amendment straw man. And you can comprehend why. Because if the people knew this, they wouldn't be marching around, would they? And they would have been sacrificing people generation after generation on a false and dead cause, not knowing that they were being misled knowingly. So,
well, didn't Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, mentioned some when he was talking about refugees?
That's what he's talking about. But remember, if you really start doing the research with Dr. Martin Luther King, whose real name is Michael, right? And know the real history in the congressional records, where he was actually, unfortunately, a plant, CIA plant, to actually divert the people away from the Panther Party, who was feeding the children breakfast and stuff like that, and who were talking constitutional principles, the right to bear arms, etc. But keep in mind, under the Black codes, that was an intrusion too, if you get the point. So to crush that, this was one of the motivations of them interjecting Michael into those operations and attaching to his operations 14th Amendment operations under the Code of Civil Rights.
Well, what is it every so often you would hear some of the so-called what do they call it, they call them black what do they call them, the Democrats, they come on, they get out and they start saying this is about to expire, and if this expires,
that's why. So what it means now look at it, which means it's not law. Okay. Just like if it's constitutional, it can't expire.
All right.
You see, but if people don't know civics, it doesn't dawn on them that it can't expire. If it was law, it was never law, because they know that the 14th Amendment was never constitutional. It's a program that has a use span, and therefore it expires. It's not law. It's color of law.
So what do they do every so often? Go back and read?
To pacify the people, because they could never be a member of the Order of the Circle Church and Chancery Corporation. See, because they remember, what are the dynamics we're dealing with? We're dealing with a concept, particularly since 1862, of indigenous and Aboriginal indigenous people being taught, trained, right? Mm-hmm. And propagated that the United States is a country, when in fact it was and is a corporate operations of the Circle Church and Chancery and the entire judicial system, governed from Fleet Street, England, under the British accredited registry known as the Bar Association. Now you know why 13th Amendment, or what they refer to as the original 13th Amendment original, and the nobility clause is never taught, and why that's controversial when you get into constitutional instruction. You'll see constitutional scholars refer to the nobility clause in the original 13th Amendment, and they'll skip over it and just talk about the unconstitutionality of the 14th Amendment, but don't get into the details. Why? Because it will expose the Sister QV trust, which is actually the operations of the straw man bondage trade system. See, once you start dealing with, people hear about the straw man, right? They hear about 14th Amendment, right?
Right.
But they don't know the operations. So they keep the people talking race prejudice and stuff like that. So you don't pay attention to this, actually the bond trading system. How is it routed? How are the bonds traded? That's the Sister QV. You see?
Mm-hmm.
Now, from a military perspective, because it's military operations, it's wardship tenures, which is you refer to. Now you understand the minority tag is a legal status. The people think it's an identity status. See the misinformation?
Mm-hmm.
Now let me show you this again, Dr. J. See, because you can't counter what you don't understand, meaning that the people are experiencing the corruption and the injury of servitude without understanding its political function, its actual function, meaning how does it work? Meaning, like many people say may operate a car, right, every day, but not understand
How it all operates.
the mechanics.
Yeah.
Same thing. People talk about the straw man without knowing its operations. We're talking its operation.
Thank you all. What are we looking for?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's looking for that just to want to remind you all that our conference is coming up
when they say
this month. Want to make sure people know.
Yes. When they say minority,
the state of condition or condition of a
read
minor.
it slowly.
The state or condition of a minor.
See, so it's not an identity, it's a political status.
Infancy, it says. Yeah.
Now you notice how loosely that word, which is a status word.
Here's minor.
Yes, read both of them. Minor, then read minority.
Minor is an infant or person who is under the age of legal competence.
Now, remember you just read wardship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now relate to the wardship to the sockage, right? Sockage. Now go to this, then go to minor.
1 under 21, a term derived from the civil law, which described a person under a certain age as less than so many years. So it's minority, as I read, is the state or condition of a minor, infancy.
So now you go into sockage. You see now the wardship. Now see how it's all there in legal terms. Now you see why they don't teach civics, because of the spiritual nature. It's dark spirit deception. They created a status, artificially placed Aboriginal indigenous people in it, trained them to agree to be it, and then by legal process under wardship tenure and military operations claim that the people abandoned their right of property, and thus they're refugees in their own land. Now you understand what Martin was talking about?
Yeah.
When he recognized that they were going to what? Neutralize him. He was no longer useful. So he starts sending out signals, which almost guaranteed that they were going. Because remember, they use people, then they discard them when they're no longer useful. This is why, if you pay attention to the history of Martin, what made in the general public history Martin Luther King popular among the people? It's the speeches he made in his last years, not the work he did before. The speeches he made in his last year, which were revolutionary. Why?
Not revolution, but revelation.
Revolutionary.
He was revealing.
Because he was revealing Masonic secrets. See, in other words, by being placed in that position, he has certain political, what you would call privileges, if you get the point. Not only that, things that they knew of his history that they were covering up because they were using him. When he no longer became useful to them, they threatened to expose the usury and his compromised position. As a counter, he started cryptically revealing some of the history, i.e. saying the people are refugees, and now he's talking about what? The Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, which he's telling them he's getting ready to let out some of the real history here. So they neutralized him. See, if you know the civic history and you know the dark spirituality, because remember, most of the people that are operating, and particularly the people that own the United States Corporation, were actually Khazarian Mafia Satanists. That's the real truth, right? So they hide behind the general label of Illuminati and Masonry, which they corrupted. Because remember that Masonry don't belong to them. That's Asiatic culture, right? Cosmology, astrology. They remember, so the Knights Templars, what this, about 1854, with their internal battles with the popes of Rome, they come to North America and blended within Masonry and corrupted it. Now, and so the people reject it, thinking it's satanic when it's actually the people, the operatives, not the culture itself, if you get the point. Now, and so they needed a language to support their political operations. That's called the Sister QV operations. That's why you never hear them tie it together. Now, Martin Luther King being a Mason, right, in secret wears a Moorish fez, just like many of them do. However, they're committed not to reveal the real history, some of which we're talking right now. It would be given in their different orders in what you call allegorical stories and metaphors, etc., or in cryptic language. When he started talking about the people being refugees in their own land, from the operative point of view of the Knights Templars and Knights Templars and Knights of Columbus, etc., which is mainly the hybrid Europeans, logically become a threat. He's telling them that he's not necessarily being how would you say, compromised to his overseer position that they placed him in. In other words, he's kind of threatening them a little bit, if you get the point. And when he talks about being to the mountaintop, then he talked about the great seal of the Asiatic, i.e. Moabite, Canaanite nation. Then that implies Masonically and from Illuminati, the real truth that's hidden among secret societies, that actually North, Central, and South America, ancient Africa. And that the separations of the land, i.e. with the separation with the cocoa plate drift, etc., now made the continent separate, and having the people think that the Atlantis, after the Red River separation, the continental shift, that there's no connection in the lands, and anciently there absolutely was and is. This is also why they set up the Smithsonians, so they could get rid of as many old artifacts that they found. Some they threw in the oceans, and some they buried in tunnels under the ground. This is what the major role of the Smithsonian Institute, and why it's located at Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. And this is why the goddess of Colombia is in the bay, i.e. that you know is liberty. So these things correlate with people who belong to secret societies. Why? Because it starts revealing the operations of the Sister QV Trust, i.e. that the general populace loosely hear as, quote unquote, the 14th Amendment, the operations of wardship with the minority. And so by being placed in that position, he started promoting, i.e., the 14th Amendment straw man, getting our people to agree to it. When he was beginning to compromise, then he threatened to tell, i.e., the refugee statement, the burning house statement. They neutralized him. But he knew it, he saw it coming.
Yeah, I firmly believe, and it kind of came to me in a download that the whole he went to jail, Kennedy made a phone call to him, and he was somehow released. Wait a minute, I believe that was all a setup to get our people
to believe and to follow the 14th Amendment, knowing nothing about the Sister QV operations. Just like we were talking earlier. If you mention straw man to some people that have some civic knowledge of operations of the bond system, they relate. If you say the Sister QV Trust, most people in their mind, it doesn't dawn on them the artificiality of 1868 and the 14th Amendment. Color law operations, U.S. democracy distinguished from the Republic. And this is, again, why and for people, and as a matter of fact, for those who are listening, take notes and go over this a little later on, because this is very important for your own studies, etc. Read this, just this right here. Now, this is the training manual of all military. Now remember, wardship is military tenures, right? This is what they're operating. This is what they're obligated to. They're operating under the U.S. democracy. They're obligated to the Republic. They overthrow the Republic and they operate under the U.S. democracy. And all soldiers are trained to this. All politicians know this. This is documented in the training manual for them. So read that, Dr. G.
The Soldiers Training Manual, TM 2000, United States War Department, November 30, 1928. TM 2000-25, 118 to 120. Democracy, a government of the masses, authority derived through mass meeting or any other form of direct expression, results in mobocracy. Attitude towards property is communistic, negating property rights shall regulate, negating property rights. Attitude toward the law is that the will of the majority shall regulate, whether it be based upon deliberation or governed by passion, prejudice, and impulse without restraint or regard to consequences, results in demagogism, license, agitation, discontent, anarchy. And then it says TM 2000-25, 120 to 121, Republic. Authority is derived through the election by the people of public officials best fitted to represent them. Attitude toward property is respect for laws and individual rights and a sensible economic procedure. Attitude toward the law is the administration of justice in accord with fixed principles and established evidence with strict regard to consequences. A greater number of citizens and extent of territory may be brought within as compass. It's within its compass. Avoids the dangerous extreme of either tyranny or mobocracy. Results in statesmanship liberty, reason, justice, contentment, and progress.
Now they take their oath on this, they operate on that. Now you see it's a training manual. So when people who don't really know civics think that politicians don't know that they're operating in a state of treason, that's because they don't know this, because this is not generally public. You see the point? So they're attached to, whenever they teach civics here, they always say U.S. democracy, don't they? Mm-hmm. And the people are always recognizing that it's constant corruption. Doesn't matter who gets in, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, no matter which of the Whiggamore party gets in, this is what operates. But they don't know this, do they? But they promote this, don't they? That's 14th Amendment. That's the straw.
And we used to pledge allegiance and say, and
exactly.
to the republic
of course, now,
for which it stands.
Showing you how people don't pay attention to details. So they'll let the politicians tell you that this means the same thing. It doesn't. But the point that I'm making, Dr. G, I want you to see, they're trained. This comes from the training manual. That's the lawful definitions from the training manual, military. Now you understand why their oath is what? Supporting the Constitution against what? Any enemy, foreign or domestic. And they operate under this. Now you see the corruption. This is why a lot of people who don't understand the dissolution of the United States Corporation Company right now, who don't really understand some of the things that Donald Trump is doing, not understanding that he's operating as commander-in-chief, which he moved from here to here.
Which is from democracy to the republic.
Exactly. And it's conflicting with the concepts that the people have been trained under. That's why they don't like him. They think he's against the democracy, which he is. And I'm not defending him. I'm expressing to you, Dr. G, the danger of people not knowing civics.
And you said when you said it doesn't matter who is in office.
Exactly.
And I'm going to do a deep dive, a class on this. I mean, just a presentation on it. But recently took a look at, just to digress a moment, Vice. You know, sometimes I've been seeing movies lately again for the first time, stuff I didn't pay attention to. Now I see Vice had to do with Dick Cheney and George W. When you look at something like that, and that was a Republican administration, it was about as corrupt as you could. But that's, I mean, I'm saying, just as we're complaining about what Biden did,
but look at
same stuff.
But look at this, Dr. G. Now, when we remove the emotions, right, and the passions created by political bias, right, or mainstream media, cognizance, I mean, when you're dealing with law, right, and the spirit of truth and law, you recognize that there's no lawful operation under the land since they murdered Lincoln. They overthrew the republic and instituted the democracy, which is mobocracy.
But it's on both sides.
Exactly. Now you understand. So now, when you know the real politics and the Sister QV operations of the straw man, you don't let them control the narrative because you know the law. Here's the law, right? When they pretend that they don't know that they're operating in a state of treason since Lincoln, and the masses don't know it, is because they don't know this. And you know why this is not taught. It becomes obvious, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because remember, this is not opinion. This is their training manual. That means people in the military are trained to this. Why is it never spoken publicly? Because they know that the United States Republic was overthrown during the Lincoln administration, and every government operation since Lincoln administration is a what? A U.S. democracy color of operation under misprision of treason. And from then on, they've been doing what? abridging the rights of the people, and the offices were sold to the Khazarian Mafia, which is now known generally with their general trustees under military tenure, generally known as the board, the General Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve. In violation of Article 1, Section 10, isn't it? Isn't it?
Look, I'm reading this.
Well, now you understand this.
Yeah. Oh my.
Now, so if someone wrote this, right?
The creature
who understands this.
Yeah, the creature from Jekyll Island.
Now, why is it that not the everyday natural person who's been paying taxes to the foreign jurisdiction, funding their own enslavement, who, when they were children, not now, but when we were children, they had you pledge allegiance to the Constitution, the Republic, and right in the people's faces, they have trained them through mainstream new media to the U.S. democracy, which is a mobocracy, and the people are complaining, and yet all of these politicians and the military are trained the difference, aren't they? That's documented. Isn't that documented? Is that opinion or is that documented?
Appears to be documented.
There it is. Is it arguable, Dr. G?
No.
This is the straw man. This is the Sister QV trust operations. Counter to this. This is counter to that. And all politicians and military officers are trained in their military war manual with that. Now you understand also when Calhoun set up the Bureau of Indian Affairs from the War Department to create more schism for the people. And people keep thinking it's an identity. Fell for the trap. Now you understand what happened in Harlem. Now you understand why they bombed Tulsa, Oklahoma. They weren't racist activities. They were acts of war against Aboriginal people. It was U.S. democracy overthrowing the Republic. Why? Because the Republic sets up their obligations to enforce the Constitution, which includes the treaty. And what is the treaty for? Protects the Aboriginal people. Now you understand the military operations with the Eisenhower administration that I keep mentioning to the people to do the research so they can understand the concepts of what's going on and not be guided by mainstream misuse and usufructuary. That is not an attitude. We're talking law. And why are not the people familiar with this, Dr. G?
Why are so many? I get calls a lot from modern Europeans who say, I've corrected my status and I'm dealing in the Republic.
Now, if they were, what would they be saying? The Republic, they would be talking 1786, 87, 1836, etc. Treaty, ordinance, Constitution.
No, but they're talking about they corrected their status. That's what they say.
Because now you're
what
talking,
are they doing? I mean,
wait a minute. See, people can make that statement.
Yeah.
Now, hold on. The status is a political position that is publicly known and proclaimed.
Mm-hmm.
When Noble Drawley said in the divine warning from the prophet, by the prophet for the nations, that's plural, he's talking Constitution, he's talking treaty, and he said part and parcel. Parcel is land, not partial, not attitude. Parcel, that means land.
Right.
So when he's saying part and parcel in the Constitution, Act 6 correlates with the Act 6 correlates with Article 6.
Okay.
So the Act 6 of the Moorish Divine and National Movement, i.e. the Moorish Temple of Science, that later adopted after infiltration with J. Edgar Hoover in 28, because of the infiltration of their operations, they adopted the religious affidavit to protect the movement. That's 1928, which you see on the authority on the back of the questionnaire. What does that relate to? Article 6. That's why, you know, it can't be emphasized enough, Dr. G. Read Article 6 of the Constitution for the United States.
Where is it?
No, talk. Let me get it for you. See. In other words, once you just get out of emotion, deal with the law. Don't deal with emotion. Don't deal with party. Deal with the law. Why must they take an oath on that Constitution? That's their obligation, not their party affiliation, what they like, who they like, what party you like, whether it's a woman or a man, all these things that they got people fighting gender wars, etc., instead of enforcing the Constitution. And who loses? The people. And what do they have? Mobocracy. They have a mobocracy. They have a mobocracy operating using the authority vested only in the Constitution, which indicates that they're operating in a state of misprision of treason openly. But in order to stop the people from rebelling, it was important to train the people under the 14th Amendment operations of the U.S. democracy so that the people don't correct the corruption within the government structure. And by virtue of that, they're attesting that the people have abandoned their rights. Isn't that how they operate?
Yeah.
Aren't they operating from the perspective that the people have abandoned their rights?
All right, here we go. Article 6 of the United States Constitution established. Oh, is that it? What it does? Well, you want me to read the actual article? Established in the laws, treaties of the United States made during the supreme law of the land, forbids a religious test as a requirement for them. I'm sorry, y'all. Trying to find it. 36. It's still saying the same thing. Thanks. All debts contracted. Here it is. All debts contracted.
Because we're dealing with the treaty. I'm dealing with the. Hold on. I'm dealing with the.
But there it is.
Because yes, it's all together. Hold on.
Okay.
Here you go. Constitution for the United States. Right here. Read it.
Yeah. Same thing. All debts. Article 6. All debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States.
So it's against them, isn't it? So that means they're subordinate, doesn't it?
Against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the constitutional laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. The senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affiliation to support this Constitution. Affirmation, to support this Constitution, but no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States.
Now, that's Article 6 of the Constitution for the United States. It opens up telling you what the supreme law is, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So what's the supreme law? Not just this Constitution, but the treaties. Right. Now read Act 6 again and notice the correlation.
In Act 6 of the Divine Constitution and bylaws, the prophet wrote, with us all members must proclaim their nationality, and we are teaching our people their national and divine creed, that they may know that they are part and parcel of this said government, and that they are not Negroes, colored folks, Black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now.
Yes.
Right.
Now, so you look at the correlation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Article 6, Act 6. What constitutes these people being part and parcel? Because they're part of the structure of the original republic. It came from Muslim law. Now you understand when Obama made that speech in Cairo, and he talked about the Treaty of Tripoli too, and he says the obligations of the oldest running treaty, and he tells you part of the history. Remember they did that roast with Obama. He's telling you the history. Now, so what makes these people part and parcel? Because the treaty supersede the Constitution. They're bound to this. Now you understand why they don't teach civics and why they promote the straw man operations of the manumission of the 14th Amendment, which is the legal, not lawful, straw man operations of the Sister QV trust operations. Now you understand seed and company and the bond system of the stock market, because the human capital is the stock.
Right.
That's why the marriage certificate, the birth certificate also is attached to the Sister QV and is not taught. Why? Because it's black spirit, demon, satanic operation with human trafficking. And it goes deeper and darker than that. We're just not getting into that right now. Now, so what I'm saying to you, Dr. G, see how this correlates?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now you see why they don't teach it. So now that's the dark, what they call satanic art. Now, it's not that it's not documented, it's documented. What does that do, Dr. G? It removes any emotional argument. But what happens when you get into these subject matters of the 14th Amendment? People start leaning on their emotions, their attitudes, and what they've been taught in school. None of which is the law. You read this, that's the law. You read this, that's the law. There's divine constitution bylaws. That's written Constitution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you go to the Constitution for the United States. All debts contracted and engagements entered into before. So before means superseding, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The adoption. So that means this Constitution was adopted from existing agreements superseding it. Adoption of this Constitution shall be valid against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. Now you understand why they don't teach treaty? Now you understand the Sister QV trust operations is the actual legal trade operations of the straw man. So if you don't know that, and people talk about the straw and don't know the political operations, they don't have a counter. It means you can know of the straw man and can't fight it because you don't know what you're dealing with. How do you deal with it? What Drawley said, help me in my great missionary work to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution for the United States. And they think it's a religion. And it has nothing to do with any religious test whatsoever. It's a civic order and activity. And how do they try to write him in history? As a religious guy. and they'll say it's a religious cult. It's constitutional enforcement for the birthrights of these people, of Aboriginal people. Now, and it's very clear, but I'm saying to you this also, Dr. G. You see why when you get into Constitution law studies, why people who are corrupt, whether in church, mosque, temple, synagogue, or pseudo government, why they get upset. What does this do? What do we just do? Expose the whole system, whether in the church, mosque, temple, synagogue, or the operation of the Democratic Party of the Whigamores or the Republican Party of the Whigamores, all who have been operating fraudulently under the U.S. democracy. And Drew Ali was bringing the people back to the Constitution. And they be thinking that he's trying to promote a belief system. He's enforcing the law. Now you understand when he said this, he says, you know, in relationship when he was talking about the proclamation letter to be read before every meeting, and he was talking about the infiltration that was happening against the Moorish movement during the J. Edgar Hoover operations. And in 1928, now you understand 1928, the back of the literature, and you see the problem that he was dealing with. And I'll read that, and you can relate. You can totally relate to it, Dr. G, because once you understand the civic operations, you understand the politics that the average person would not even think of. Look at this. Look at this, Dr. G. Now, remove emotions, deal with law that we just presented, right? And deal with timeline, and you'll understand the movement. He says what? Read that.
This right here?
Yes, all of it.
This whole thing?
Yeah, everything. Because you got to put things in context. Because we're talking to Sister QV. This is a counter to the Sister QV. This is what people don't understand. This is a counter to the 14th Amendment. This is a counter to the straw, lawfully made, and people think it's something else. I'm showing you the correlation. Read it.
Our authority, copy, book 521, page 579, State of Illinois, Cook County, SS number 10105-905, filed for record. Corporation, religious affidavit of organization, State of Illinois, County of Cook, form number 1099, SS 1928, August 1 p.m. 2:52, and recorded in book I Noble Drew Ali, recorder Salome's Jaskanot. Yeah, somebody. Moorish Holy Temple of Science held at Chicago in the County of Cook and State of Illinois on the 20th day of July 1928. For that purpose, the following person were appointed sheiks according to the rules and usages of such Moorish Holy Temple of Science, do solemnly swear that at a meeting of the members of the Noble Drew Ali, Mealy L, Small Bay, Lovett Bay, and Foreman Bay, the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, deriving its power and authority from the great Quran of Muhammad, to propagate the faith and extend the learning and truth of the great prophet of Ali in America, to appoint and consecrate missionaries of the prophet and establish the faith of Muhammad in America. And said Moorish Holy Temple of Science adopted as its corporate name the following: Moorish Science Temple of America. And at said meeting, this affiant acted as presiding officer, subscribed and sworn to before me, 20th day of July 1928, Drew Ali, Roberta W. Connell, Notary Public.
And so you see, that was a civic act to counter the Sister QV operations, lawfully reattaching the people in Congress in public proclamation, the civic organization I was looking for the literature because I wanted to show you the literature. The civic organization, which is the Moorish Temple of Science, which is a civic organization adopted for its political operations, the Moorish Science Temple of America. So the name Moorish Science Temple of America is the political operations in the corporate world to protect the civic operations of the people in their rights in their parcel connection to the land via Article 6 of the Constitution and reflective in Act 6. You see the civic connection? It's a counter to the operation of the Sister QV. This is why when you look in the Moorish literature, what does it tell you with the message to America? With Drali, he says what? Moorish Temple of Science, established, registered as a civic organization. That civic organization still stands. In its political operations in the corporate world, the Moorish Science Temple of America is adopted for its corporate name. Its civic name is Moorish Temple, Holy Temple of Science. And what is that established for? To remove the mysticism, the coloration, the de facto, the fiat operations of the straw man 16th Amendment operations of 1868, i.e., with the Sister QV operations of the Circle Church and Chancery, which is the political theft of the natural sovereign right of the people, loosely referred to as birthright theft. But those who know law know it's what? The right of heritability. And there it is. Now, and so this is again, Dr. G, when people who know law look at the movement differently than people who approach it emotionally. So that the system of operations under the 14th Amendment is a corporation. And under that corporation, to steal the birthrights of the people, or what is called their sovereign right, they created the licenses and converted the people's rights. It's called conversion. That's where licenses, fines, the taxes, foreclosures have their origin under the U.S. democracy of mobocracy. And these are not governance. They are corporate business transactions under bond systems. And these instruments succeed only because the people, by ignorance, consent to them, and by silence, abandon their right because they don't know that they have rights, and by ignorance or by cooperative participation for lack of knowledge. So the prophet Drali warned, if you are not careful, your own brothers will put you back into slavery. And that slavery today is not with chains, but with colorable contracts, misrepresented contracts under misprision of treason. And so now let us look at what we're dealing with today in 2025. The U.S. foreign corporate structure has not loosened its grip under the 14th Amendment Sister QV operations under commercial grip against and upon the natural people. To the contrary, it has tightened and operating under a color of law, and everything the owners of that private corporation run is based on colorable and misrepresented contracts and trust. And that trust is the Sister QV operations guided by the manumission operations, which is known as the 14th Amendment, which is known as the straw man or man of straw. And this deals with the marriage certificates, the birth certificates, etc., and all those instrumentalities forward. The living, sentient man and woman is treated as a corporate person and not a natural person, i.e., that is the Sister QV operations. And the corporate state acts as the FOFR or trustee. As a FOFR under the U.S. democracy, under the republic, they would be lawful trustees. Same word, except that the FOFR is under feudal operations. That's the U.S. democracy. And they set themselves up under a godship and usufructuaries over the natural people's estates. And their estates including all rights, all liberties, all hereditaments, corporal and incorporeal, managing under wardship tenures your right, your liberties for life. That's what the usufruct is. That's what the Sister QV is, i.e. the straw in its political and corporate stock trade operations, and are held as property, and the resources are as if you were incompetent. Thus, the tag minor, minority, sukage law, etc. Now, that is why the people have been abused under taxation, contrary to Constitution and treaty, under licenses, contrary to Constitution and treaty, under foreclosures, on violation of Constitution and treaty, under bills of attainder, constituting false arrest with bills of attainder, unconstitutional. And all of these operations is administration of the Sister QV trust under trust, legal, not lawful operations. And the major reason why this operations of the Sister QV trust operates and works is because the people consent without knowing, which means it's an unconscionable trust and contractual operations, which means it is unconscionable, and an unconscionable contract is both unlawful and corrupt. And the people out of ignorance sign instrumentalities without reading them. And if they did read them, not knowing that it's a Sister QV trust transfer, which is the manumission. And they answer to names that are not theirs, which constitutes nom de guerre, which constitutes abandonment of heritable right. And they remain silent, which in law is an agreement by what is called acquiescence and abandonment. And so they are handled legally, but not lawfully, as state property. And that's the Sister QV operations.
Wow. And well, and here's the spiritual truth. Every contract in law is also a contract in spirit.
Because it's the spirit of the contract that enforces the law.
Right. The birth certificate is a tether of energy. It attaches you. The license, as he said, is the consent to jurisdiction. And the mortgage is a chain on your spirit, your wallet, or whatever, you know.
And the mortgage means dead pledge.
Right. So when you sign blindly, you give away more than property. You give away power. This is why many, like I said earlier, many feel heavy, drained, hopeless. Yep, because your life force is tied up in contracts, and you don't understand. Folks don't understand that. But the divine law has always said no soul can be bound without consent. The moment you awaken and say, I do not consent, you begin cutting those ties. Now, you have to say that.
In law. Now, in saying that, in law, so now we're getting out of emotion and getting into law. That means the living, competent being presents what is known an affidavit of fact, stating the same. Now you understand what proclaim means? So proclaim means you're making it public. That's what an affidavit is.
Right. And
yes.
Yeah. So just to finish that off, but the matrix is both legal and is energetic, or what I was saying, spiritual. So it feeds on your estate and your energy. And what helps you is the awareness that the sword that really severs its grip. You got to have that ability to do that, to cut yourself off from that.
Now this is why we're saying what we're saying, so that people know what they're dealing with, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so this is why civics is a spiritual discipline, and this is why they don't teach people that civics is a spirit instruction. Why? Because they want the people not to approach it, because they can't analyze the dark spirit from the light, i.e., they can't separate the legal from the lawful, i.e., from the de facto from the de jure, from the colored from the fact, i.e., so they can't distinguish that which is colored from that which is real, i.e., thus the fiat operations in the monetary system, in the legal system, and in the so-called dogma system, misrepresented as religion. All of that is fiat. And so to proclaim nationality is in the nature or the spirit of the knowledge of the law, to enforce the Constitution, to study the treaties, i.e., and this from a mental perspective is a renewal of the mind for the resurrection. And it is rising from civil iter mortuus, or what is called civil death, into full life, which is civil life in society, i.e. Yield the floor, Dr. G.
Well,
So what must Moors do?
Yeah.
They must proclaim their nationality. That's a spiritual act through a civil platform. And so they got to stop operating or answering to names that delude to slavery, which are known legally as nom de guerre, also loosely referred to as brands. And they must stop signing into and onto contracts without a knowledge of in personam jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, and territorial jurisdiction. And they must enforce the Constitution in the political realm or social structure or body politics. It is the supreme law of the land, and thus your supreme shield of protection in government operations, or in your duties, or what is known as civic duties, your social civic duties. And so you must teach your children who they are in pedigree, not in brand, not in nom de guerre. Now, so the Prophet Noble Drew Ali said to the Moors, you are a nation of people bound together by ties of blood and principles. And sovereignty is not a slogan. It is the law of life.
Right. And sovereignty is daily. It's in your speech, it's in your thoughts, it's in your agreements, you know. So if you say I'm defeated, that's your contract, you know. So if you answer to false identity, that is your contract. Mm-hmm. But when you say I am Moorish American, I am sovereign, I am divine, that becomes your contract. That becomes your contract. And the unseen world, the spirit realm, honors that.
From the political perspective, that reattaches you to the obligations that they have to protect your rights. That's what was known as the sovereign oath, that all political heads or people holding any political office must take an oath on the Constitution. And that's what ties you back part and parcel to government. The civil liter mortuus status of brand names takes you out of it. It's called abandonment. Continue.
Well, the Circle 7 Quran chapter 1 teaches man is not the body nor the soul. He is spirit and a part of Father God. And that spirit can't be bound by paper, but it can be tricked into bondage through ignorance. And
see,
you said that
that's why they take the body.
Right.
You see, now that's where you see the unum sanctum. This is where they talk about unum sanctum and dumb verses. Now you see those edicts coming from the church are dealing with the civil dead. And this is why, from a code position, not just etymological, but from a social science position, he says what? Black, according to science, means death. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about the non-de guerre aspect of it.
Right. Now, sovereignty is the union of awareness and law. And so now just for a moment, I've never, very rarely ask anybody to do anything, but if you would go with me, let's just turn inward for just real briefly. So now just for a moment, wherever you are, close your eyes and take a deep breath and place your hand over your heart. Now you feel the rhythm of your own breath. You feel that, Grand Sheik?
Mm-hmm.
That rhythm is divine law. That pulse is your first constitution. No government gave it to you. It's your inheritance from source, from the Most High, from your Creator. That's what that is. You know, so don't ever let anybody think that.
Now you understand why when they make pledges, they place their hand over the heart, right? Because it's a spiritual operation to the civic connection.
Right.
But again, you see the motive of the trainer's manual, and that meaning that they're not unconscious of what they're doing, or are they, Dr. J?
No.
That means they're not doing what they're doing to the people ignorantly, are they? Are they?
No.
Their own documents and their own training manual display it. Why does not every man, woman, and child operating in the civil realm, arguing to vote, marching to vote, don't even know the rules and what they're signing up to? And that these people that they're voting for, they're sanctioning criminals who are obligated here, but are operating there. It's called, by law, what's that called? Isn't it called misprision of treason? Isn't it obvious? Meaning that you don't need an opinion. It's obvious.
Right. And the prophet said that man must be lifted up by his higher self. So sovereignty begins within, and the Constitution is external. The treaties are external, but the divine law is on the inside. And when your spirit aligns with truth, deception can't bind you. When you align your mind, your spirit, and your words with the truth, the external structures, they lose their grip. So sovereignty is not only about how you file or how you stand in court. It's about how you carry yourself as a living soul. When you walk in truth, deception can't bind you. That's the truth. When you live in love, fear can't master you. And when you know who you are, no paper and no court can make you forget it. So when you proclaim nationality outwardly and sovereignty inwardly, you unite. This is what we're talking about. United, very at the beginning. You unite law and spirit. Now, so before closing, though, we want to go over a few questions that we're often asked. And I mean, I know some of you have some questions that you've posed in the comments, but we do have a few. You know, sometimes it's your personal thing, but we wanted to go over some things that may be more universal. And when you're talking constitutional, you are talking universal. Right. See, now then you go into Article 3, Section 1 and 2, and you see whether there's a controversy between people in one political state. And we're not just talking the states in different government. We're talking states. We're talking plural. So controversy of people in the same states, in different states, and foreign states. So that Constitution is an international document. Now, so the nationality card is a public instrument affidavit. The question is, do nationality cards matter? Yes, they matter. Because you can't use the law for protection if you're not a party to it. This is where people who would just assume that they have political rights and then try to proclaim them, and are often said to by the magistrates operating under the corporation. And they've said that to many Europeans who have used UCCs and financial statements, i.e. to claim a status. And the magistrates has told them that you can't use that Constitution. You're not a party to it. 90% of the time is because they claim to be white people.
because to be a part of a constitution, your forefathers must be a party to it. The Constitution is what? The treaty, Articles of Confederation, and the present Constitution comprises the supreme law of the land. It is in place to secure the rights of the nationals and the citizens, i.e., whether public ministers, diplomats, or consuls. It establishes your court system. It's very clear. So to be parcel of it, you must be a party.
Right.
You see, and this is why civics is so important, because the people who don't understand civics think it just applies because it's there. If you're not a party to it, you can't use it as protection.
Right. And I want to add that the card carries vibration only when it's backed by knowledge and belief.
It's a public affidavit.
Yeah.
That's its power in society. It's a tool. It's a political tool. It is an affidavit. Upon challenge, it is presented to command your protected rights and the obligations of all persons holding any position. This is why it says the representatives, the Congress, the representatives, and the judges of every state are bound thereby. That's Article 6. So you must be a party to the treaty, the ordinance, or the present adopted constitution coming from them. If you can't make pedigree claim in connection, you can't use it.
Which brings me to the next question. What about dual citizenship?
It's a fraud under the democracy operations. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve two political jurisdictions. And the only way that is done is Article 3, Section 2 under the consulate venue, because it's stated that's the law. So if you're not a party in treaty, you can't use the protection.
Right.
Because remember, the whole operations of the dual citizenship was done with the fraudulent operations of the theft or assimilation of land in Palestine after the Second World War.
You're right. The split energy
That
is bondage.
was done,
yeah, but
no, it was done to support the U.S. democracy fraud. It's a fraud.
right. So what about doing it?
It is not constitutional.
Well, split
Was
energy,
not and is not.
but split energy is bondage, and wholeness is sovereignty. So the answer to that question is no such thing. As,
Well, it's very, see, in other words, this is why,
Got
Dr.
that.
G, it's important to
Thank you.
just simply state what the law is, and that answers your question. Not say my or anyone's opinion. Go to the Constitution. That tells you everything.
Okay.
And the Constitution consists of what? Treaty, ordinance, confederation, present Constitution. That comprises the supreme law of the land. That's your reference. Not opinion, not emotion, not a bias. That comprises the supreme law. And the judges of every state are bound thereby. And any laws of any corporate state or any other political state to the contrary, notwithstanding.
That's one of the questions that we have already is how do courts treat Moors?
Moors, just remember, the people under the black codes are still Moors. They just give up their birthright when they claim the black codes. That's why the brand system, or what is called denationalization, exists. And in a counter move to that is also why the international community introduced the rights of a child.
All right. Yeah.
Or what is called is rights
The
of
international
indigenous
rights.
people.
Yeah.
Now
Okay.
I can read that to you too, if for those who are not aware of it. It's not that these things weren't addressed, Dr. G. It's that civics has not been taught.
Well, we have another question here that I wanted
Go
that
ahead.
I starred that was here. Does acknowledging the public servants of the public trust as trustees of the Sister QV Trust on each and every document create a sufficient paper trail of established knowledge of sovereignty?
This is what establishes law. Article 3, Section 2, if you're dealing with anyone exercising any authority of office, is called a quo warranto. What you would do is take the name of the person, man or woman, holding any public office. You go to the county clerk or the city commissioner and get a copy of their oath to office. And that would be called, whether it's a magistrate or judge, that would be called an Article 3 issue. That's what your quo warranto is based on. Because someone holds a public office does not mean that they're an officer unless they have an oath and a bond together, because that's required in law. We're back to civics and why civics has not been taught. So most of the people that the people have been submitting to are actually private, foreign, human traffickers perpetrating official office with authority not vested in them. This is again why it's important to understand that all the persons operating under the United States Corporation Company since 1862 are de facto. Thus, all rights, sovereign rights, revert back to the people. Nevertheless, all of those people are obligated to that Constitution, nevertheless, because they're claiming an office. You hold them to it. That's why they must all have bonds. Back to the principle of understanding civics and the spirit nature of civic operations, which is again why we're talking the Sister QV operations. You got to know what you're dealing with to protect your rights. And this is why they often say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have them. What they're saying is that by ignorance, you're abandoning your rights or relinquishing your rights. Then they get you to sign or do a verbal trust contract, and they'll ask statements like this: what's your name? And then they'll have a Sister QV in all caps on a piece of paper, and you say, that's me. That's an agreement. And instead of making an affidavit rebutting the Sister QV instrumentality of the 14th Amendment of 1868 and declaring your nationality, but your connection under constitutional protection, that's why you have a national. That's when the nationality card has what is called lawful standing in the court. Now you just changed the venue. That's what the tool of the nationality card is for. In public venue, it becomes an affidavit. An affidavit of fact is called status. All right. So, Dr. G, so when one enforces the Constitution, you're declaring, in other words, to have the power, the legal standing. The nationality card is presented, so that establishes for the record the status. The magistrate already knows because they took an oath to the Constitution. They already know that the Constitution includes the treaty and the ordinance and the Articles of Confederation, and the being before them, the natural person before them, has a nationality card more, so they know the treaty is the treaty of what? Tripoli, Treaty of Peace and Friendship. They're a party. They're not under the Black Codes. Now they have obligation. Now you see how the nationality card is used? You're declaring for the record your party. So that's your affidavit for the record. Now they have to prove their position. And what happens is they're a party to the private foreign corporation operations of the United States Corporation Company, distinguished from the Republic, thus by law have no jurisdiction. Because the jurisdictional claim would be Article 3, Section 2, consular venue. Now you go back to the administration of Eisenhower, and you see they relinquish jurisdiction. So that means by law, that the Moorish Holy Temple of Science and all members have right of presentment, then you understand Act 1, that the ministers and the chairman of the Moorish Temple of Science are put in power to make law and to enforce law. Now, that's a consular position right there, Act 1. You see how it all ties together? Once you understand civics, you understand the divine constitution bylaws and its connection to the Constitution for the United States and the divine warning and the message to America. You see how it all ties together? And the authority. That's how it's used. And you don't get off it. If they trick you into getting off a subject matter conversation, then you, out of ignorance, give them jurisdiction when they don't have it. But you're being a national, or among them, if among the citizens, that principle applies. Now you've just bound them to their oath. That's Article 6. And they can't go outside that unless you allow them to. That's why they start talking BS and get you into off-the-cuff conversations. You don't go off-the-cuff conversations. You stay to the Constitution. Why? That's the supreme law of the land. What's Constitution's supreme law of the land? All treaties made, Articles of Confederation, and this Constitution shall be binding to the representative, the legislator, executive, executive, all branches of government. And any laws that they claim to the contrary has no standing whatsoever. Article 6. It's the point that I'm making, Dr. G, none of this is complex except that people usually have emotional thoughts in their mind trying to follow what they've been told in mainstream venues to get them off Constitution. That's called abandonment. And it's how they've been tricking you. That's why Drew Ali said, what? Your nationality card will change in your pocket. That means once you really comprehend and understand and understand what you really got and the spirit of the civil law and its connection to your forefathers, then you reclaim your birthright. So under civil liter mortuus, you have no rights. With a nationality, you now come from civil liter mortuus into what is known as full life in law. That's what the nationality card represents. It represents an evidentiary evidence of affidavit of fact of lawful status, not just legal, lawful status of the natural sentient man or woman standing before the venue of the court that only has authority by virtue of their constitution. Yeah, that's it.
I think that's it for us. But you know what? Before we go,
Mm-hmm.
I have we wanted to.
Oh yes.
That we wanted to. This says by L. Jordan L. But I know the brother as Brother Taj Dayami. I'm maybe saying it wrong, but he's written amazing Moorish children's coloring book. I want to thank him for sending both Grand Sheik and I signed copies of his book. It says introduce your Little Moorish Lights children's coloring and activity book. Introduce your child to their noble heritage with this joyful and educational coloring book inspired by the teachings of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Little Moorish Lights is designed for children ages 4 to 8 and filled with pages of fun, faith, and learning. Whether your child is learning about their roots for the first time or deepening their cultural pride, this book helps them connect with who they are in a fun and affirming way. Perfect for use at home, in temple, or school as a meaningful gift. It's a really and I want to thank the brother for sending us a copy of it. Also, before we go, I want to make sure, Raleigh, we do give thanks for your presence tonight, and pray that you may walk in love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. But we also want to remind you not to forget to visit our new website, which is www.houseofreawakeningminds.org. We no longer have the .com, but .org. It's a work in progress.
Mhm.
It's a work in progress. But in the coming month, I would say maybe even before this month is over, you'll see our actually newly updated. We're doing we have a secondary website being developed at the same time that's got more features, which be more interactive, more informative, a place where you'll be able to commune and to meet and fellowship and share, and there'll be a lot more videos and different things on there, membership levels and so forth. And we can, we're going to do a lot more of the unfiltered, but we're going to put them on there where you can access there. So stay tuned. And last but not least, we're going to remind you, September 15th is fastly approaching, and that's the deadline if you're going to come to this year's conference, which is the 25th through the 28th. I think it's 4 days. So please go and register on our website if you plan to go. Come. www.houseofreawakeningminds.org. We appreciate you.
Yes, a reminder for those who are listening, read the historical message to America, and you'll see that the Moorish Temple of Science is a civic organization for political reasons and civil reasons of infiltration, etc., to counter and to protect the birthrights of the people. The religious affidavit was adopted as its corporate name operations in 1928. But the civic operations is unincorporated. Are we clear?
Okay.
That's what you see on the back of the questionnaire.
Right.
That's the spirit of civic instruction.
Well, I think that's it, right? We want to thank you.
Islam.
Again,
Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Vadi mekum. Bon abort.
We appreciate you being here. We're gonna go out backwards, like the way we normally go. And as you notice, like I said, we again shout out to Brother Raj Bristol Bay, who has created our new opening. But we're not letting go of our original one, because that has actually,
that's the spirit of the history of this,
right? That so
channel.
we're gonna keep my spiritual daughter Maisha, the one she wrote and sang over the phone in 2015.
Yep, she sure did.
Going, and then we're gonna close out after that with our new video, which we love and we appreciate. Brother Raj, who's also our webmaster, doing an amazing,
very talented.
Amazing
very
job.
Talented.
We are so grateful for what he's doing for us. We appreciate
deeper
it.
and deeper
So we're going,
I go.
and if you want to hear a new song, stick around to the very end.
I should know, 'cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening.
This is not merely a building. It's a sanctuary of remembrance, a threshold where the veil parts, and minds once lulled to sleep begin to rise. This is the house of reawakening minds.
I entered in silence, intellect and despair, seeking refuge from illusions thick in the air. Walls lined with scrolls, lectures dense with light, where knowledge resurrects what was hidden from sight. No pulpit performance, no charismatic show, just a word in its purity, allowing the soul to grow. History unpacked with surgical precision, exposing falsehood, restoring vision. They taught me jurisdiction, the power of a name, how to stand in one's truth, free from legal games, from colonial codes to Moorish descent. I learned that ignorance is the true imprisonment. Not just a church, this is consciousness refined. I found myself inside the house of.
This is sacred ground, not just wood and stone. A haven for the seekers who once felt alone. Here the veil is lifted, the contract unwinds. In the house of reawakening minds. Truth is the altar, wisdom is the flame. Every soul remembered, every bloodline reclaimed. Time collapses and the spirit aligns. Inside the house of reawakening
We
light.
speak of capitis, diminution, and trust law with grace. Pulling veils from the statutes that distort the race. Reverend Doctor don't preach, she teaches through metaphysical keys and universal speeches. From Egypt to Amexim, maps are redrawn, and the minds of the lost are profoundly reborn. They decode etymology, undo the brands, expose how black was a corporate sleight of hand. This is reclamation through language and tone, where status is corrected and sovereigns are grown. From natural law to the astrological signs, the cosmos converge in these sacred confines. This ain't dogma, it's the science of the divine. Every lecture a seed in the garden of the
You
mind.
said know thyself, but gave no guide until I found the house where illusions died. Here the soul remembers, the contract is clear. We are the heirs and the ancestors cheer. This is sacred ground, not just wood and stone. A haven for the seekers who once felt alone. Here the veil is lifted, the contract unwinds. In the house of reawakening minds. Truth is the altar, wisdom is the flame. Every soul remembered, every bloodline reclaimed. Time collapses and the spirit aligns. Inside the house of reawakening.
They don't ask you to believe.